Thank you guys so much for being here. So you guys welcome and thank you to the Arizona State University Cronkite School presents What It Is Like to Cover the 2020 presidential election. We're so thankful and glad that you guys are here. The undergraduate degrees at Arizona State's Walter Cronkite Journalism School of Mass Communication is one of the best journalism programs. It offers a skilled, focused, hands-on journalism and mass communication experience that prepares you for a career in media. Now, during your time at the Cronkite School, whether you're in person, remote, in the field, you'll get to experience the exciting aspects of traditional journalism and many other types of journalism as well. So participants, please know that all the attendees are muted for the session. And there is a question and answer icon there if you want to click on that to ask some questions. We also have a chat feature too, and you can put the questions in there as well. All the webinars are being recorded. They're set to automatically record. We'll put them up on the STN website in the next couple of days. And first, I'd like to introduce you to Sam Icorvea, and I really appreciate you guys being here. And go ahead and take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for that, Ben. So then, yes, my name is Sam, and I am the undergraduate recruitment and admissions coordinator here at the Cronkite School. Just a little bit about me. I'm actually a Cronkite alum myself. I did graduate in 2016. So of course, I love the school so much that I just had to come back. But then I'm just really excited to share some cool stories from the Cronkite School to all of you here. And just thank you so much for your time to choose our session to visit. So with that being said, we will start out by introducing some of our awesome panelists here. And so I'll leave it to you guys just to say a little bit about yourself. Just tell us what your name is, what year you're currently in, and just some of the extracurricular fun things you've done here, whether it's been a club or a professional program. So then we'll start with Tina, and then we'll go with Jake, then Maitali, if that sounds great to you guys.
Cool. Hi, my name's Tina. I'm a senior here at the Cronkite School, and I am obviously about to graduate, but looking for a job. So that's kind of one of the biggest things I'm doing. But throughout college, I was in a sorority. Alpha Gamma Delta, if anybody's interested. I also did about 8 internships. Right now I'm interning for the PBS NewsHour West here. That's on the 5th floor of our school. So yeah, I've done a bunch. I'm also one of the editors, one of the top leadership editors for the multimedia side of our school newspaper, the State Press. So thanks for having me.
Hi guys, my name is Jake Santo. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'm really definitely a ways away from home. I'm currently a second semester senior at the Cronkite School. I'm actually a sports journalism major. So definitely this is something that was really interesting to me when I had the opportunity to cover the 2020 election. Previously, I've worked for a number of different teams and organizations, including the Arizona Diamondbacks, Phoenix Rising, the Society of American Baseball Research, and the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. So I have a lot of sports knowledge on that background. Currently thinking about grad school, maybe into the job market. So a lot of interesting ways for me to go in the future.
Hi everyone, my name is Maitali. I'm a grad student at the Cronkite School right now. I actually did my undergrad here, and then we have an option to do an integrated master's program as well. So I'm doing that currently. I did the Cronkite News in DC Bureau with Tina that we'll talk about in a little bit. I was with the Howard Center before that, which is an investigative reporting bureau. I've done internships across the valley, including the local NPR station and local ABC affiliate as well. I've done Blaze Radio, which is our local radio station at ASU. I had a Bollywood music show, which is really cool on that one. I was president of the Walter Cronkite College Council, so I worked with leadership in that way and just dabbled in a bunch of different stuff at Cronkite. So we're excited to be talking with you guys today.
Awesome, thank you all so much. And so I would say that something that connects all of these fabulous students together is Cronkite News. And so if you were hanging in before we started talking about our session here, With Cronkite News, it is actually one of our professional programs that we have here at the Cronkite School. And think of professional programs as these souped up kind of class experiences. These students are in Cronkite News all day, and it's very much a real world experience for them. And so, it gets them so many different opportunities, and you could take them many, many times. As you overheard, Tina took it 3 times and Jake's taken it twice. And now Mightily, I think you took it once or twice. I know for sure the last one was in DC. Yeah. And then no matter if you take it once or multiple times, it's just a really rewarding experience and a goal that a lot of our students have coming here. But then having said that, then could you guys just talk a little bit about what your experience was like covering the election in your individual professional program? And could you just tell like a specific story about, how you were covering it and what you felt, like what emotions you were going through as you were covering something? It's a loaded question, but then, anyone who wants to take it first, I'm all for just calling it out. So.
I guess I can go. My story. So we have our regular newscast at 5:30 here on Cronkite News is aired on Arizona PBS, so our PBS station at 5:30. So on election night, we have a regular show, and then we have a special show that was aired a few hours later. And so me and Mightily were in DC at the time. That is like such a rigorous process because we were calling sources. We stayed there really late, like getting numbers and stuff. And of course, the election wasn't called that day, but DC was all boarded up. My story that night was about how DC prepared, riot prep, stuff like that. So my story was getting footage of people putting up the boards and stuff like that. So I also interviewed people that were at the Black Lives Matter wall, which is right in front of the White House, and how everything was fenced off. There was police everywhere. And then we did a live shot in front of the White House in that same area. And it was kind of crazy because there were so many people just around and stuff. Nothing like crazy happened, nothing like, riot or anything. None of that like happened, but like we still had to do the live shot. We had one take, and my director, Steve Crane, was like, giving me cues, and I was standing in front of the camera and I just had to start, right when it went to me, no practice, nothing. So it was a really, really interesting experience, and I'm really glad that I got my package in on time and I got everything to air. So it was crazy.
Yeah, I think what was really crazy about this year was just how different everything looked in the world, especially with COVID. So we got to go to DC, thankfully, and we were all safe. I was really thankful. But right from when we went in August, we just hit the ground running with coverage, whether it was covering the conventions virtually, covering stories like right up to the election. We stayed on top of everything Arizona related because we were in DC. So whether it's covering our congressional delegation, covering Mark Kelly's Senate race, we were on top of everything happening that related to Arizona. So what's interesting was that even though we were in DC, we were covering news for Arizona PBS. So everything Arizona, we were the only local Arizona station in DC. So anything that happened in Arizona, everything happened, was all through us. So we would cover everything there. We did a lot of course, in-person reporting, but also just like virtual reporting. We really covered everything we could, honestly, from bills happening, and everything looked so different this year with everything going on, but we got to tell stories in so many unique ways. We got to, whether it was pulling footage, whether it was running wherever we could. We were at the Supreme Court, Tina and I and our whole crew, the night when RBG passed away, and we were doing social media stuff from there. We were doing just so many different things that we wouldn't do unless we were there in person, and we got to cover some really incredible stories from there.
So I think my experience was a little bit different than both you guys. I was actually stationed here in Arizona. I mentioned before that previously I'm a sports journalism major, so this isn't usually my area of expertise. This is something I don't normally cover, but what is great about Cronkite News is they give you the availability to do things like that. For the election coverage, they had all hands on deck. So they were asking people from sports journalism program, anybody who was in Cronkite News, to go out and cover the event. So I was actually assigned with a broadcast reporter. I'm stationed as a digital reporter most often. So we were actually assigned 3 election polling places that we went out and covered. So it was a very interesting morning. I think I woke up at 3:30 a.m. To get to the polls as early as possible. Once polls opened, we were there reporting all day. So we spent a couple of hours with my broadcast reporter, just covering stories. My job was to write vignettes, so little vignettes for about a paragraph or two, just explaining to people why they might be voting, how their experience was, just to kind of get a basic understanding of what their responsibilities are of voting. So actually our second polling location that we visited was the Glendale Community College in North Phoenix, if you have any familiarity of Arizona. Believe it or not, it was actually a polling place and actually a COVID-19 testing site. So it was a really interesting story angle that we were able to cover. And it was it got a lot of press on social media, believe it or not. And it was funny enough that I got contacted by somebody from NBC News, one of the producers, and they were asking some questions about what we were doing there, what the scene was like. So about an hour later, actually they had an NBC crew show up. And if you know anything about Stay Tuned on Snapchat, Gotti Schwartz did a live hit there on MSNBC. And he thanked me later and said he wouldn't have been able to find that story without my reporting. So little things like that, it really shows the power of social media and how the power of, student journalism, we're not allowed to say we're student journalists, but at the same time, what you do really is very impactful, and what you're reporting really matters to people.
Yeah, I just had one more thing to add to this question. There was obviously, like, we were the only crew in DC. Obviously, we had our people here in Arizona, doing at the polling places and stuff. We really were hands-on, but at the same time, we were the only crew in DC, that was in, from Arizona, reporting all that stuff. But this election went on for the whole thing kind of went on for several weeks, we can all agree. And so there was leading up to the election, there was election night, but then there was after. And that was like a really big part of like covering this, because a week later when they announced or however many, I forget, when Biden was, declared the winner, I mean, people flooded the streets. And so we went with another reporter, me and Maidalene, a couple other reporters went, and the other reporter covered the story of like people on top of the fence, like everybody dancing, like this just pure celebration in the streets. And then also, like the Trump rallies that would happen afterwards and stuff. So it was really interesting to see like the aftermath. It was kind of like, it was crazy. It was like a wave of emotion each time.
And what was so crazy with all our coverage was that we weren't, even all this was all happening, we didn't cover only the election. Like we had so many stories coming out. We were covering everything around that. Just like, I think at the end of the semester, we published almost like more than 200 stories as a bureau, which was insane. But there was just so much happening that we're focusing on like regular news, everything going on, plus the election. So it was like, that wasn't of course our only focus. We covered so many different things, but like that was of course the big one, but it was like so much happening. We had to stay on top of all of it that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool, just as a testament to what all of you have done, that you are basically rubbing shoulders with other people who are involved too, just in professional outlets. And then what's really cool about Cronkite News is that our students' work can also be published in other professional outlets as well. So like some of our students' bylines might get picked up and they could be published in any other types of media, whether they're like local networks and TV stations or local papers and elsewhere just around the globe. Our students' bylines have been picked up in the most random places you could imagine. And it's just really cool, a cool way to get your name out there as well. And so something else too, just kind of like to what Jake mentioned, it's crazy how interconnected journalism is. Like you find out that people really know each other really well. And it's awesome because then it works out well for all of our students and our faculty involved because it helps to know people. And so thank you all for just sharing some of those things that you covered. It's really great. And it sounds like it was jam-packed too. And so then when it came to your day-to-day activities, how would you describe what Cronkite News is like on a daily basis?
So I've done Cronkite News about 3 times now, currently in my 3rd semester. Each time has been different. The first time, my first semester last spring, coronavirus happened in the middle of everything. So before that, my first story right out of the gate, I was on the health beat, took me to Mexico. I did a story about vaccinations at the border. I spoke a little, Spanish, English. We did all the different kinds. That story actually got picked up by Telemundo, and then I went over there to front the story as well, the Telemundo affiliate here in Phoenix. So a lot of things were happening. You get in at 8:30, you have to be on time, you come in, we do our editorial meeting, and then you're starting on your story, and you better be working on it. I mean, they're not, your director isn't always right here, but you better be working on it because you have deadlines coming up, whether it's for the show, whether it's for your digital piece that's due in a little bit. You just have to be very diligent with your time. In DC, it was a little different gig because it was just one director, Steve Crane. And so we got in at 9 and we just started. He would come in and be like, what do we got? And so we just have to, spitfire pitches and really work with him what we can cover. Me and Mightily often went to stories and didn't come in for the editorial meeting because we were already at stories. And this semester, coronavirus has been now throughout. So this semester, it's like a mix of virtual and in person. And so when coronavirus first hit, we were at our houses. We couldn't go anywhere, so we had to really figure out what to do. So me and a few other students figured out how to do a virtual newscast. So it was like me and 2 of my other friends literally stayed up until like 3 a.m. one night and made a newscast of us at home with a little setup and everything. And we sent it to our directors. And then after that, it became a staple for the rest of the semester, the summer, and then also throughout the fall, we'd also have like a remote newscast. But it's really evolved, and it's really been like, you're just busy. You're busy all day, and you're really covering some fun stuff.
I'm just going to jump into the question in the chat that I see from Grace.
I was just going to say thank you.
Okay, cool, of course, yeah. Which is, how early in your schooling at ASU did you get to start using equipment and being on Cronkite News? Okay, so the cool thing about Cronkite is that you're a journalism major right from day one. You come in freshman year, you're a journalism major. So you kind of start using equipment that early. Your classes, your first field, or your first class with equipment will probably be your JMC 305. That's in your second semester of freshman year. But different organizations that we have at the school start using equipment right from the first semester. So if you're involved with Blaze Radio, maybe with State Press Video, with Walter Cronkite College Council, with the Walter Cronkite Sports Network, different organizations will have you reporting right from the first semester. So you have equipment that way that you can use, or in your classes, you'll start second semester, and it's kind of from there. And what's really nice that if you ever get to visit our school, you'll see that we have a really pretty equipment lab on the 6th floor that has all the equipment you could dream of. Everything that's in the industry exists in our school, from cameras, DSLRs, video cameras, tripods, microphones, lenses, the whole shebang. So you get access to all of that great equipment just by being a student at the school. So you get to use that in that kind of way. And being on Cronkite News, you can start after you have a couple of your prerequisites. Typically junior or senior year is when you do Cronkite News, just so that like you're equipped with the skills you need, the classes that you need to do that, and then you kind of start being a reporter on Cronkite News, because Cronkite News is pretty much a first job almost. You're working 9 to 5, you're working like those full hours, you're covering real stories, you're covering stories that have an impact. You're really going out there and you're covering stories for an actual news station that airs on Arizona PBS. So you're covering, or for our website, which goes digitally all over. So you're covering real news all over. So you are a journalist in the real world. So that's why you have a little bit more time to kind of get the skills that you need. And then you're kind of just thrown out your way. But of course, with our director's support, you have a safety net there, which is really nice to kind of have this teaching hospital model that we call it, where you're learning while you're on the job, but you're still getting to get that real experience before you even graduate college.
Thank you so much, Magdalene. Yeah, and thank you so much just for explaining that, because I know with ASU, it's a very attractive program for a lot of our students here, just because you could really hit the ground running right away just in your first semester. I mean, a lot of our students, they combine the general eds with journalism classes that they take. And, you know, for some places, it might take a little while to get to those journalism classes, but you get to take them from the very first day. And then, you know, you could also be part of all sorts of different clubs. And then those you don't even have to have prior experience for. But of course, if you have it, all the power to you, you know. But it's just a great place for those who really want to hit the ground running and take advantage of as many opportunities as they can. And so, you know, with Cronkite News, it sounds like everybody in this panel, they've been super involved already. And so would you have any tips to share for, you know, being a good journalist and like what makes a story good, you know?
I can go on this one, but with me, when it comes to a story, I always look for something that people can relate to. whether that be maybe a heartfelt story or something that maybe another person can directly tie to their own family, their own experience. I think that's what really makes a great story. And that's what I love about Cronkite News. You're a little bit more in depth with your pieces. With me being in the sports bureau, it's going to be a little bit of a different experience for somebody who's doing politics or news on a daily basis. We're not doing a game story. We're not doing a basic recap of the night's action. Instead, we're looking for a feature story that maybe another outlet hasn't covered previously. So that's what I think is makes you successful, something different, something unique. I think that Cronkite News really helps you develop those skills.
Oh yeah, I see someone said, can I ask a quick question? What's up?
Yeah, I had a quick question for you. To kind of go back to the part about the presidential election, could you tell some of us and the attendees too, there was so much conflict, and with you guys really in Mariposa County, you guys in the heart of one of these swing states, can you elaborate a little bit more about the experience of what it felt like when everything was so polarizing, even just in the city and the state and the region of where you guys were?
That's perfect. Thank you, Ben, because that was one of the questions I had coming up. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I can go on this directly because I was in Maricopa County covering the election directly. So I could see the tense environment that was around. I could see actually I saw a couple of arguments take place, in whether that be in the parking lot or just outside the polls with either poll workers or just people interested in the election itself. You could feel the sense of people were really unsure about what was going to happen, and they were really trying to push their beliefs in what they were trying to do. I mean, as a journalist covering it, you always have to remove yourself from the situation, whether you believe one idea or another. For me, like we had a couple exchanges where they were asking if we were involved with CNN or something like that, but most people were really, really nice to us. They were willing to have a conversation with us. There were people who just ignored us and kind of just talked about otherwise, didn't want to speak to us. But you can feel that it was a really important state. It was a really important county that eventually decided the 2020 US election.
Yeah, I think because Tina and I weren't physically in Arizona at the time, we didn't, of course, feel the same tension that Jake did. But I think none of us expected to hear Maricopa County in Arizona said so many times in like national newscast. We would hear it like every other moment. We didn't expect that at all. But I think just covering it even from DC, we saw that it really had an impact. Every other story had some, of course, we covered at Arizona Connections, but like every story had some sort of Arizona angle, which is really interesting to see. And I think, like Jake said, removing yourself is like really important as a journalist because like we're objective, unbiased, kind of straight down the middle, especially with PBS and with Cronkite News. But again, I think it's really important to just like be very self-aware of like what you're covering and then what your personal biases are, so that you can like kind of keep them at the door and just keep this function that way. Because like especially with political stories and especially how polarizing this election was, it's really easy to kind of get caught up in the rhetoric of whatever that is. So by just kind of staying true to your journalistic objectives, then why you're doing the story, and then for what reason, and kind of going about it that way. And of course, relying on your crew members. I think Tina and I had a really great crew in DC. So the fact that like we got to like rely on each other so much in terms of keeping each other objective, keeping each other just like kind of on the right track was really important. So we functioned like a real newsroom. We were relying on each other, whether we did like stories together, we would tag team that way. We would also just like kind of be each other's support systems, because this was a really hard election to cover, whether it was like physically being in DC or Arizona or wherever you are, just because of all the stuff that's happening. It's so fast moving. It's just very complex, and it's a lot of keeping your personal bias objectives at the door. So that way, having a crew to rely on was like really helpful, and just kind of being aware of like everything that comes with the territory of covering politics in the election is really important. So just kind of like be mindful of different things that way.
I think before we get to the question in the Q&A, I'd love to answer, but just real quick, there's always going to be conflict in journalism. Being in DC, I mean, picture this. I'm standing in front of the White House and like people are driving by, and there's these protesters that are always protesting in front of the White House, putting up signs on the fence. And then there's, this, very long running protest in a tent, and there are people sitting outside. And then you have these people that are are yelling at you at the same time, and you're just sitting there, and then you realize you're an observer. You're here to just look around, grab your camera, get everything, and that kind of transitions into this question that says, how do you know what footage would look good or work best? Do you try to cover everything or just the important parts? That's something I have to say that I learned so much here, because when I was in my 3:30 class, which is our in like one of our reporting classes where we're doing our stand-ups, and it's the one class you take right before Cronkite News. And so that's the one where I was like trying to get footage of everything that I saw. But really, it's something that you'll learn. You got to narrow it down just a little bit. You have to narrow it to what is the action that is happening and what is important. I used to be so anxious. I'm like, well, what if I don't have enough? Then I'd be sitting there with like 5 hours of footage that I didn't need. Really, an interview doesn't need to be 10 minutes long. It really could be 5 minutes. If you ask really good questions, when you think of a broadcast story, you're using 10 seconds of one of their answers. But you gotta, work with what you have. If you're doing a story on the election and there are people protesting outside, you want close-ups of eyes, faces, hands with flags, and of course wide shots. So you'll kind of feel it in your bones after a while. You'll be like, no, I'm good. I have enough. I have what I can do for a minute 30, 2-minute package. And that comes with a lot of practice and time.
Kind of going back to that, like, even though a lot of the stories that we do at Cronkite News are in depth, some of them are day turns. Like Tina and I did turn in some day turns for the show where we would go out in the morning, cover something, and then it was in the evening newscast. So in that time, you're having to find the story, go out and physically report, come back, write your script, edit it with your editor, and then put your package together physically, and then have it ready for the newscast by your deadline time. So when you're doing all of that in a couple hours, you don't want 5 hours of footage to go through. You want to make it as easy as you can to really like put your package together. So when you're on deadline, like having like honestly like less is more when you're on deadline. Yeah, you want to have like when you're filming itself, kind of like visualize your package, how you want it to look, and get only those shots that you really, really need. Because the last thing you want is to sift through like 4 hours of footage for like a 1-minute story that needs to be out for that newscast. Otherwise, like you're stuck and it doesn't go, and you don't want any of that. So really like knowing what your deadline is and editing it, and kind of how you're going to have to edit this. So just think about it from that way when you start filming for a particular story.
And then one of the most important things, by the way, is sound. Like you think, oh, well, it's okay, you don't need it. That sound is one of the most important things in and it can make or break the beginning of your package. And it really like brings the person in. You're really grabbing that person's attention. If you have like a story about hiking, well, instead of just having a person walking and then your voice, will have like the gravel sound underneath their feet, or like the sounds of like the wind through the trees, or like rustling. And I'd make my own sound, like if I'm at a shoot, I make some type of sound or whatever, with what was around me. Or even I'd be like, one time I did a story about bocce ball at this senior center at the Italian club here in Arizona. And I just had that. I was like, hey, can you throw that ball again? I want to hear the sound of like them clinking, or like, whatever. And that's like perfect. And it can make or break your story.
That sounds like that really immerses you in stories too. It helps the viewer really feel like they are there and get a better idea for the characters involved. And so it's a great tip. And there is another question too in the Q&A. It's really open to anyone who wants to answer. So they're asking, do you use search trends to pitch story ideas? And if not, how do you find good story ideas?
That's the golden question. How do you find a good story idea? I wish there was an easy formula, because then we would all be using it. Story ideas are really hard, honestly, because like there's so much going on. You really want to make it worthwhile. I think what's important is for us, at least for Tina and I, especially with Cronkite News, our stories were pretty limited to Arizona. So that kind of helped us like really narrow our search down. We would kind of look at what was happening that day, like whether it was something in Congress going on, looking that way for a story, or even just like I did many data stories this semester with Cronkite News about like money stories. So I would like kind of look through like Federal Corporation Commission, just their numbers, like who's spending for ad money, who raised how much money for the election, where are they raising money, and stuff like that. So I got a lot of really good story ideas from there. And then I was able to kind of use that and then humanize those stories and find people who are actually donating to campaigns and why they do what they do, kind of thing. So numbers were a great place that I was able to find a lot of good stories. And kind of just like looking around you, see what's going on. We found a bunch of really cool stories because someone walking into the office that morning would see a protest somewhere. And then we would kind of figure out an angle for us to cover, and we would cover that as a story. So just keep your eyes and ears out, kind of see what's going on around you, see what people are talking about. It could be search trends, it could just be conversations. Facebook groups are generally good places to find stuff if you're looking for like community-oriented stories. Of course, and then kind of see what's happening nationally, like what are people talking about nationally, what's happening everywhere, and see if you can localize that story for your community or for your state or whatever you're reporting for. And just kind of, yeah, by staying on stories that like Jake kind of talked about initially about humanizing stories, like something that people can relate to, whether it's a person, whether it's an issue, making sure that you can find a character and tell your story through, or maybe using a character as your story, and then telling it through that person and through their lens, and kind of using that as your tool to tell the story and bring that to your audience, whether it's digital, broadcast, radio, whatever it may be.
I just want to jump in real quick too. Sorry. No, Jake, you can go if you want.
No, you can go. No.
Okay. So my first year here, I jumped in straight away to being on the politics desk for State Press. So I know we've been talking about Cronkite News, but I learned how to pitch at State Press because every Sunday we had to have 3 pitches in the dock, and I was politics, and I really found some amazing stories just by talking to people. I became friends with some of the legislative communications people, even the legislators themselves here in Arizona. So learning how to talk to them, and then also working with my editors to see if there was like somebody, maybe like there's a school club or whatever, and their Facebook page is open or whatever. Also, the other thing is really having that connection, that source relationship is really what I'm talking about, is because then they'll text you and be like, hey, there's this thing that's happening. Do you want to cover it? And so I'd be like, sure. And I found this one story as a freshman at Cronkite. I found this story about this girl in one of the towns here in Arizona where she's 20 years old. You know, she was a college junior, and she was running for city council of Prescott, Arizona. And so I just found this story from people telling me, and then also just from finding it on Facebook and stuff. So that's really a great way to find stories. And we did that right out of the gate. Join State Press and you're learning pitching right away.
I think for me, specifically working with Cronkite News, I think you get to rely on your coworkers a lot, whether that be maybe they're a little bit more familiar with a certain topic that you're talking about, but they always are a great resource to use for story ideas, whether they have a story that they wanted to do or they don't feel comfortable. I've had people come to me say, I think you would be great for this story. Why don't you write it? I think that is a little element that I don't think people get enough credit for. If you are willing to work with each other, help each other out, it's going to go a long way in this industry. And people remember that. Maybe it's not today, maybe it's 10, 15 years down the line, but the people you're working with today might be hiring you for a job. So things like that. I've had directors come to me about story ideas that have turned out fantastic. I recently just wrote a story about a girl that my director talked to me about. She had 2 cardiac arrest episodes and had a heart transplant. And that story I would have never found on my own, but my director thought it was something that would be great for me, and it turned out fantastic. So little things like that, getting in-depth knowledge and working with your coworkers, I think is a great way to find story ideas.
Yeah, I just want to bounce off of that too. I always am bouncing off ideas off of my friends here at Cronkite News. And I think that's like the best way to survive. But at the same time, a good story pitch is, and this is why it's good to bounce off of other people, because a good story pitch, you always have to ask yourself, okay, there's a bill that's happening in the Senate today. Well, what does that mean for me? Who's going to care about that? Like, why do we care? My director, Steve Crane, would always say, why do we care? What can we do with this story that'll make people actually want to watch it, read it? And how can we make it so that it's impactful? And yeah, there can be a sob story or something, or like a certain character, and really grab onto that and like try to see how you can just report the facts, but still have that like interesting kind of like factual, but also have that humanizing element, like Miley was saying, because that's like the key. Because you want people to relate to the story. You want your pitch to be like, well, why does somebody care about that? Well, if Mrs. whoever down the street is having that same problem, let me interview her. Maybe people will have the same problem And here we can all come together as a community. So that's really how journalism works.
Thank you all so much just for your input on the questions too. It's really appreciated. And for anybody else, that I know that we're coming close to time. We have about 10 minutes left. One of the questions I actually had for you guys, just, we've been talking about how to develop stories, and especially in an election like this, where it was very polarizing in a way. I feel like this climate's been very polarizing for people's opinions on journalists too. And so how do you all feel about people's reaction to journalism as students who are studying to become journalists when they graduate?
I mean, for me, I am pretty straightforward. When Ruth Bader, let's start here. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, we lived right next to the Supreme Court, like a street or a couple blocks down. And so, yeah, like we were, personal bias or whatever. We had all of our personal feelings and opinions on it. But all of a sudden, with all of us, and Mightily, I think you would agree, a reporter switch in our brains just switched on. And we were like there. We heard people crying and we had our own emotions, but like we were there to report the story. So we just went up to people, graciously, kindly, politely asking them questions. And it was just like, one of my friends described us that were covering it, like you guys just covered it with no emotions, but just like, you were still empathetic, and I think it's hard right now because people are like, oh, fake news, like journalists or what. But if you know yourself and you know that you're producing your best content that is factual and honest and down the line, I mean, no one can get you for that. So if you're confident in yourself and you're doing the right things, I mean, just hold your head up tall. I mean, we're all in it together. So you can always have your friends to lean on. I mean, I worked at the Arizona Republic and people would send me emails all the time like, this was bad, this was fake. And I'm just like, you know what? I know that this was real because I didn't put any biases. I took what other people told me, I took what the police told me, and I told everybody else. So I know that I was doing the right thing. So therefore, you can't bring me down that way. It gets hard sometimes though, trust me.
Yeah, totally agree. There were sometimes like when we covered some protests in DC where like we would get a lot of eyeballs. You would get a lot of people saying stuff like, you guys are journalists, you guys are reporters and stuff like that. So yeah, it wasn't always the most comfortable situation, but then again, journalism never is. You're always asking like hard questions, you're in hard situations to be in. And I think it really prepares you to kind of like just again, like you said, like be down the middle, because like at the end of the day, if you're reporting facts, if you're doing your part in telling the story in a fair, accurate way, portraying everything in the right context, yes, you can you're going to hear stuff, people will say stuff about your story and your reporting, but like if you know that you're doing the right thing, that's all that really matters. You're going to see a lot of like Twitter trolling and like random people commenting or stuff, but like at the end of the day, you're doing your reporting, you're doing your best. That's really all that matters, and you can't really do anything more than that. So having a thick skin is like really great in journalism, because like you'll have sources not call you back, you'll have people say stuff about you all the time. So just kind of like developing that thick skin is really great to have in journalism, especially.
I think the thick skin is like a really good, and that really shows what it's like to be a journalism major, because nothing works out in journalism. If anybody has been in the field, nothing works out. Source doesn't get back to you, something doesn't work out, the Zoom interview doesn't happen on time. It's a never-ending cycle of that. What you love those stories when they do work out. Have I been called fake news before out in the field? Of course. It's an interesting element, because say 4 years ago when I came into ASU, did I think I would be called that every once in a while? Yes, but as much as I have been, no. It's been an interesting saga, to say the least, but just always keep your head up, know you're doing the best work you're trying, and just be true to yourself. If you're reporting the stories fair and accurately, nothing will be wrong at the end of the day, and you'll be able to sleep at night knowing you did what was right.
Thank you all for that. And so I know that now we're at 2:40, so we have about 5 minutes left. Ben, I don't know if you had any comments or questions that we should add in here, because I don't want to go over time. I want to respect time here.
No, we definitely still have a few more minutes left if anybody else has any questions. If I could, when you guys are reporting in DC, is there ever a time, I mean, you must look to the left and like, oh my gosh, there's CNN, or look to your right and there's Peter Alexander. I mean, is there ever a moment you're like, okay, let's go?
I mean, for sure. I was standing in Black Lives Matter Plaza, which is right outside again the White House. We spent a lot of time in this area because we were always running there, running to the Capitol building and stuff, or the Supreme Court especially. And there's always a press pool of reporters, and so there'd just be like scattered. You know, you'd have CNN, you'd have people from CNN Chile or CNN Mexico. You'd have literally, and you can just pick them out. You're like, I see him on TV all the time and stuff. I mean, you don't see Jake Tabor all the time, but sometimes you might see a correspondent that like Yamisha Sendor or Lisa Desjardins from the PBS NewsHour. I mean, you have all those people there. I think what was really interesting is that me and a couple of the other reporters, I mean, we're young reporters, and yeah, we never went to Washington, D.C. before, so we not snuck, but we like made our way, used our press passes, and we're like, hi, we're here. We got into the press pool. I mean, we were right between Reuters and CNN. It was crazy.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you all so much. And so I guess we're good to wrap it then, unless, people have any other questions. I mean, you could also find the Cronkite School at the college fair that's going to be happening on Saturday, February 20th as well. So feel free to stop by with any questions. Be sure to mention if you were able to join us today, because we would love to elaborate on anything if you have any questions. But otherwise, you could find out more about Cronkite at the college fair. But in the meantime, Tina, Jake, and Mythili, thank you all so much for your time, for being here and sharing your experiences. And I believe that all of our panelists put their contact information in the chat, and including me too. So if you have any questions for any of us, please, by all means, feel free to reach out to all of us. We're all super personable here at the Cronkite School, and we love to talk to everybody. So by all means, thank you so much for choosing to spend time with us today. And thank you all for being part of the panel. So thanks in general, and have a good rest of your day. And thank you, Ben.
I loved it, you guys. It was very nice to meet you. Take care.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.